Chapter 20. The day of the first snowball, Mercy got out of bed. Judith, venturing outside as far as the mill, came back, her cheeks glowing with bits of feathery white clinging to her cloak and to her dark curls. "It's snowing," she announced. "Snowing?" Mercy struggled up on one elbow, her voice eager. "Come, let me touch it, Judith." Judith drew near the bed and held out her sleeve. The flecks of white vanished under Mercy's reverent fingertip. "I must see it," Mercy insisted. "Just for a moment, Mother. I can't miss the first snowball." It took much preparation, as though for a long journey. 2 pairs of knitted wool stockings between her feet, and the coal boards, the blue shawl wrapped securely around her ears, and a heavy quilt swaddled around her from head to toe. They formed a little procession, Rachel and Judith supporting the invalid at each elbow, and Kit followed behind to hold up the trailing ends of the quilt from the sanded floor. Very slowly they crossed the room to the front window, and Mercy sank weakly in a chair and rested her chin against the window frame. Outside, the grey afternoon was speckled with drifting light. Already a thin powdery dusting had gathered in the wagon ruts of the road. The flakes fell softly, vanishing in the heaps of brown leaves, swirling in the little smoky clouds. "I love the first snowball better than anything in the world," sighed Mercy, her eyes worshipful. "I can't imagine why," said Judith practically. "It means you can scarcely step foot out of the door till spring." "I know, but it's so beautiful. It makes the house seem so warm and safe. To think that Kit has never seen snow before. Go to the door, Kit, and feel it for me." Kit went obediently to the door and stepped outside. The white flakes made a queer sort of confusion before her eyes. They brushed her cheek like tiny flower petals and caught on her eyelashes. For a moment her heart lifted with a trace of Mercy's excitement. Then the cold dampness soaked through her thin sweepers and she shivered. "I'm not sure I like it," she thought. "It's curious and lovely in a way, but it makes everything so dark, and somehow it makes me feel shut off." Somewhere, far beyond this endless curtain of white, green leaves and flowers were glowing under a great, bright, warm sun. Would she ever see them again? Next morning, her dark fears were swept away in a rush of fun. Under a cloudless blue sky stretched a breathtaking, glittering universe, carved with dazzling white coral, unreal and silent. Every familiar sign was altered. There was no trace of life or motion. It was as though no eye but hers has ever looked out of upon this purity and perfection. Then, as she looked, a living thing dared to intrude upon this untouched wilderness. Through the white carven carpet that had been High Street pushed 4 oxen, buried up to their middles, dragging behind them a great, heavy plough. Snow fell away from the great blade in a gigantic way. "We're breaking up the road," explained Judith. "Now we'll be able to get to the lecture." That evening, for the first time since Kit's arrest, William came to call. He had stayed away, he explained, out of consideration for the illness in the house. He inquired courteously after Mercy's health, and she smiled at him from the bed where she sat propped against the feather pillows. Rachel fluttered to draw a chair for him. On the opposite side of the hearth, Kit was intent on her spinning. She had taken over Mercy's flax field and was slowly mastering the art of winding a fine uniform thread. It took concentration and a steady hand. Now the humming of the wheel barely slackened as she raised her eyes for Vaughn's grave, cool look. William's eyes flickered away towards the leaping flames. It was Judith who kept the conversation going. She had fiercely resented her enforced absence from church and lectures. Now she demanded to know everything that had happened, which of her friends were up and about when there might be a sleighing party. "I hope John gets back soon," she said. "Thankfully Peabody's wedding is to be in December, and I can't bear it if he's isn't there for that. They say in the town that there's been no word from the detachment since they stopped at Hadley. There's been new Indian raids up Deerfield Way. Judith dropped her knitting and stared at William. Mercy leaned her head back against the pillows and closed her eyes. Aunt Rachel sprang to her feet in alarm. I'm surprised at you for spreading rumors, William, she reproved them. There's no news is good news. Now, this way past Mercy's bedtime. She looks white as a ghost. She hesitated. Kit, you and William can lay a fire in the company room if you like. Kit did not look up from her spinning. It would take a monstrous lot of wood to heat the room before midnight, she observed. William took the hint and pulled on his heavy beaver fur coat and cap. Kit would not have risen from her place at all, but Rachel, with a meaningful nudge, handed her a candle, and she had forced to see her suitor through the door. In the hallway, William did not seem disposed to hurry. He lingered so long that Kit was forced to shut the door behind them and keep the chilling draft from the kitchen. I missed you, Kit, said William finally. I had to come back. Kit said nothing. You don't seem very pleased to see me. How could a girl say that? There had been a time when she had longed with all her heart to see him. Besides, there was something more on William's mind. I don't want you to think that I'm holding anything against you, Kit, he said awkwardly. Everyone knows that you meant well. They're all saying in the town what a help you've been to your aunt in these past weeks. You'll find when you come back. I promise you, Kit, that everything is willing to let bygones be bygones, and that you can make a fresh start. Kit looked down at the tip of William's great boot. What do you mean by a fresh start? She asked quietly. I mean that it is well over. The widow Tupper is gone, and it won't be necessary to see much of the Croft child. Don't you agree, Kit, that from now on it would be wise to use a little more judgment about people? Mind you, I'm not speaking against charity, he went on, seeing her mouth opening to protest. We're supposed to care for the poor, but you overdo it, Kit. But it wasn't charity, Kit burst out. Hannah and Prudence, they were friends. That's what I meant. That's what I mean. We're judged by the company we keep, and in our position, people look to us for an example of what is right and proper. And I'm to set an example by turning my back on my friends? Kit's eyes glittered. Oh, Kit, pleaded William miserably. I don't want to quarrel with you tonight, but try to see it from my side. It would make a man uneasy, never knowing what his wife would do next. That would make a wife uneasy, never knowing whether she could depend on her husband, Kit answered levelly. William had the grace to flush, but he held stubbornly to his position. A month ago, Kit's temper would have flared, but all at once she realized that William could not really anger her. She had a long time to think, that night on the river bank, and the longer night in the constable's shed. She had never consciously made any decision, but suddenly, there it was, waiting and unmistakable. There's no use, William, she said now. You and I would always be uneasy all of our lives. We would always be hoping for the other one to be different, and always being disappointed when it didn't happen. No matter how hard I tried, I know I could never care about the things that seemed so important to you. The house isn't important to you? He asked slowly. Yes, in a way it is, she admitted. I like to live in a fine house, but not if it means I have to be an example. Not if it means I can't choose my friends. William, too, had been doing some thinking. He did not seem surprised, only gravely regretful. Perhaps you're right, Kit, he conceded. I've hoped all this year that you would forget your old ways and learn to fit in here. If I thought you would just try, she shook her head. Then I won't be coming again? It's no use, William, she repeated. At the door he turned and looked back, his face baffled and unhappy. There was in his eyes just the merest flicker out of the look she had seen there on that first morning outside the meeting house. In that instant Kit knew that she had only to speak one word or to stretch out her hand. But she did not speak, and presently William opened the door and was gone. Now the long evenings about the herd were seldom revealed by any visitor. For hours on end were of the spinning wheel and the twang of the loom were the only sounds, except for a formal bow of greeting on Sabbath morning and on lecture day. Kit did not see William again till the day of Thankful Peabody's wedding. Thankful's wedding was the first festivity Wethersfield had enjoyed since the sickness. Through drifts of snow waist high, by sleigh, sled, and snowshoe, young people and old folks and children gathered in the spacious Peabody house, real to shake off the labor and anxiety of the past weeks, and to rejoice with the happy couple. The feast spread out on the board would be talked of for weeks to come. There were apple and mince and dried berry pies, little spice cakes with maple sugar frosting, candied fruits and nuts, pitchers of sweet apple cider, and great mugs of steaming flip for the men. 7 different kinds of cake. Judith counted surreptitiously. I'll never be able to have anything half so grand at my wedding. Kit scarcely heard him. She was remembering the last wedding she had attended. Could it be only a year ago in Barbados? She could shut her eyes and see the long damask-covered table, set with gold and silver plate. The banquet had lasted for 4 hours. Light from crystal chandeliers had twinkled back from gold, braid, and jewels. Deep windows had opened out on curving formal gardens, and the sea breeze had filled the room with the scent of flowers. An almost intolerable loneliness wrapped Kit away from the joyous crowd. She was filled with a restlessness she couldn't understand. What was it that plagued her with this longing to turn back? Was it that far-off memory of elegance and beauty, or was it just the look in Thankful's eyes as she stood, radiant in her rose-colored, blustering wedding dress, and listened to the toast to her future? Kit and Judith, each lost in their own thought, stood together near the wall, unable to join in the merrymaking. From across the room, William watched them gravely, making no move. When the bride and groom had driven off in their sleigh towards the snug new house that awaited them, the guests turned back to the laden tables. 2 fiddlers in the corner scraped a lively tune, and some of the more daring young people began to dance. No one paid attention to the 2 tardy guests who appeared at the door, letting in a gust of wind, till suddenly a woman screamed and threw her arms around a snow-covered figure. Then abruptly the music stopped and the laughter was sank, and every one crowded about the newcomers. They were 2 Wethersfield men returned from Massachusetts with the detachment of the militia. The story they had to tell put a somber end to the happy evening. Of a detachment of 20, only 8 had come back to Hartford. Just the sound of hammering before they could have reached Deerfield. They had been ambushed by Indians who attacked savagely with both arrows and French rifles. 4 men had been killed outright, and 2 others had died of wounds on the trail home. The rest had been surrounded and taken captive. For a few days the survivors had attempted to follow the Indians, till a heavy snow had made it impossible to go on. They found the scalped body of one of the captives lying by the trail, and they had little hope that in the weather any of these prisoners would have been spared. They had turned back and made their way on snowshoes, barely reaching Haley before another blizzard set in. The sobered guests crowded close, waiting for one answer. No, none of the Wethersfield men had been killed, but one of the captives that was young fellow who had been studying with the doctor, John Holbrook. In the mingled relief and horror, 3 of them, No one noticed the faint wail that came from Judith, or saw her wayward fall. Kit and Rachel sprang forward, but it was William who reached her first and carried her gently to the settle by the fire. And it was William who then chucked her carefully in her sleigh and drove her home. In the weeks that followed, watching Judith, Kit began to understand how the grey shadow that was her Aunt Rachel could once have been the toast of an army. Hopelessness had erased the color of animation from Judith's face, and set her lovely features into a still mask. Kit ached for her,